The land lay quiet beneath the towering shadow of Mount Zaraba, its jagged peaks piercing the sky like the teeth of an ancient beast. The mountain's presence loomed over the village below, a constant reminder of power and mystery. It was said that the mountain was sacred, its stones kissed by the ancestors, and its heart guarded by restless spirits. To the villagers, the mountain was a protector and a judge, its shadow a shield by day and a warning by night. Around the village, dense forests whispered in the wind. The trees were old, their roots tangled deep in the earth, as though they sought to hold on to the memories of countless generations. At the forest's edge stood the great baobabs, their gnarled branches stretching wide as if to embrace the sky. These trees were more than wood and bark. They were silent witnesses to the stories of the past. To sit beneath them was to hear the whispers of forgotten truths and hidden curses. But for the people of the village, those whispers held fear. They believed that the baobabs knew too much, their shadows casting judgment over the guilty. And so, as dusk fell and the stars began to shimmer, the villagers retreated into their homes, leaving the secrets of the night to the trees. Far from the center of the village, at the edge of the forest, a small hut stood alone. It was humble, with a thatched roof that sagged in places and walls smoothed by years of wind and rain. Inside lived Zubadi, a widow whose beauty was as striking as her silence. Her skin was the deep, rich tone of the earth after the rain, and her eyes, always downcast, seemed to hold the weight of countless storms. The villagers spoke of her often, though rarely with kindness. Cursed, they whispered. She brought her husband to ruin. Barko, her late husband, had been a hunter, strong and bold, but he had disappeared years ago in the cursed forest of Umwoko. And since then, Zubadi's life had been marked by isolation. She should have left, some said. Why stay in a place that doesn't want her? Others, more superstitious, believed she stayed because she was bound to the land by some unseen force. Zubadi never answered the rumors, never defended herself. She worked hard, tilling her small plot of land, weaving baskets, and keeping to herself. But the silence only deepened the villagers' suspicions. She hides something, they said. A woman like that always does. On a night when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, a young boy named Kofi crept out of his home. He was curious, as boys often are, and the world beyond the safety of his family's hut called to him. With bare feet and a quick heart, he wandered to the edge of the forest. It was there he saw her. Zubadi stood in the clearing, bathed in the silver glow of the moonlight. She was digging, her hands gripping a small shovel, her movements frantic yet purposeful. Dirt flew over her shoulder, her breath coming in gasps. Her face, illuminated by the moon, was etched with determination, and something else Kofi couldn't name. His heart raced. Why was she digging? What was she looking for or hiding? Kofi crouched behind a tree, too afraid to call out but too fascinated to run. Zubadi paused, wiping the sweat from her brow. She whispered something, too soft for Kofi to hear, and then returned to her work. Her hands trembled, yet she dug as though the earth itself had wronged her. Unable to bear the fear swelling in his chest, Kofi fled, leaving Zubadi alone with the shadows. By dawn, rumors spread like wildfire. Kofi had told his mother, who told it, the neighbor, who told the village elders. She was digging a grave, someone said. I heard it with my own ears. A grave for who? Another asked. Or for what? The elders gathered beneath the largest baobab tree, their faces grim. Baba Omari, the eldest among them, spoke first. This is no ordinary matter, he said. His voice was deep and commanding, yet laced with the wisdom of years. To disturb, The earth under a full moon is to call upon the spirits, and no spirit answers lightly. The villagers nodded, their fear growing. They were a people steeped in tradition, their lives guided by the wisdom of their ancestors. To them, Zubaydi's actions were not just strange, they were dangerous. "She is cursed," said one woman. "Her husband's disappearance was a warning, and now she brings ruin to us all." Others murmured in agreement. The whispers grew louder, feeding on their fear. But Zubaydi did not appear in the village that day. She stayed near her hut, her face set in a mask of calm. Yet inside, her heart was heavy with memories. Memories of Bako, of his laughter and strength. Memories of the forest, where he had ventured and never returned. She could still hear his voice in her dreams, calling to her. "Zubaydi," he said, his tone gentle but insistent. "You must dig. The truth is in the earth." And so, she dug. Each night, under the watchful eye of the moon, she returned to the clearing. The grave grew deeper, and with each shovelful of dirt, she felt closer to something she could not name, but knew she had to uncover. The villagers watched her from afar, their fear turning to anger. "She brings shame to us all," one man said. "To dig at night, what spirits will she awaken?" "She is a witch," another declared. "Her silence is proof of her guilt." Baba Omari raised a hand to quiet them. "We do not accuse without proof," he said. But even his words could not calm the storm brewing in their hearts. As the sun set and the forest grew dark, the whispers of the villagers mingled with the whispers of the trees, and as Zubaydi stood alone by the grave, her hands caked with dirt and her soul heavy with the past, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The sun dipped low over the forest of Omwoko, its last rays painting the trees in fiery hues. But to the villagers, the light only heightened the forest's menacing presence. It was said that no one entered Omwoko without leaving a piece of themselves behind. The elders whispered that the forest was alive, its roots entwined with the spirits of the betrayed and forgotten. Bako, a hunter known for his courage, had laughed when the elders warned him. "What power does a tree hold over a man with a spear?" He had scoffed. "Bako," Baba Omari had said, his voice steady, "pride leads even the strongest warrior into ruin. Omwoko is not for the living." But Bako had not listened. He had ventured into the forest, chasing a prize that no one else dared to seek. Days passed, then weeks, and when Bako did not return, the whispers began. He angered the spirits. The villagers said, "Omwoko does not give back what it takes for Zubaydi." The loss was like a knife that twisted deeper with every passing day. She sat by their empty hearth, staring at the spear he had left behind, the only piece of him that remained. When Bako did not return, Zubaydi became a woman of shadows. Once vibrant and full of life, she now moved through the village like a ghost. She kept her head low, her words few, as the whispers around her grew louder. "She is cursed," they said. Her husband entered the forest because of her. The spirits took him as punishment. The isolation was crushing. When she walked to the market, the women turned their backs. Children pointed at her hut from a distance, daring each other to get closer, but never crossing its threshold. At night, Zubaydi lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the weight of their stares and whispers pressed down on her. Her days became a battle. She tilled her small plot of land. Her hands blistered, and her back bent, but the villagers refused to trade with her. Hunger gnawed at her ribs, but her pride kept her from begging. Instead, she turned to the forest's edge, gathering roots and herbs to survive. She should leave, they muttered. The spirits will bring more ruin if she stays. But Zubaydi stayed, in her silence and solitude. she held on to a thread of strength, though even she did not know why. It was Kofi, the curious boy, who saw her one night. The moon hung full and bright, its light spilling over the village and forest alike. Unable to sleep, Kofi had wandered out, his small feet silent on the cool earth. He had no purpose, only a child's restlessness and a flicker of curiosity. And then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a spirit. Zubadi stood in the clearing, her frame illuminated by the moonlight. She was digging, a deep, steady rhythm, the shovel biting into the earth as if she were fighting it. Her hands moved with a desperation that frightened Kofi. Her face set, in an expression he could not name. He hid behind a tree, his breath caught in his throat. Why was she digging? What was she looking for? Or worse, what was she hiding? Zubadi paused, wiping the sweat from her brow. She muttered something under, her breath too soft for Kofi to hear. He watched her for what felt like hours before the fear grew too strong. He turned and ran, the sound of his pounding heart drowning out the quiet of the night. By morning, Kofi's story had spread. The elders sat in a circle beneath the baobab tree, their faces dark with concern. She was digging, Kofi repeated, his voice trembling. Under the full moon, I saw it with my own eyes. Digging a grave, one of the women said, crossing herself. Who does such a thing? Baba Omari frowned, stroking his long white beard. This is no ordinary matter. Zubaidi's actions call upon the spirits, and no spirit answers lightly. The whispers swelled like a rising tide. She's a witch, someone said. She's cursed, another added. The villagers demanded action, their fear fueling their anger. She must explain herself. Baba Omari said finally, bring her here. Zubaidi came when summoned, her steps steady and her face calm, despite the growing crowd. The elders sat in a row, their eyes sharp and unyielding. Why do you dig under the full moon? Baba Omari asked, his voice carrying the weight of the villagers' fear. Zubaidi met his gaze. The spirits know why, she said simply. Her words hung in the air like smoke. The villagers erupted in murmurs, their suspicions confirmed in their minds. Baba Omari raised a hand to silence them, but even he could not hide the worry in his eyes. Among the crowd stood Adisa, Ba'ako's sister. She had always resented Zubadi, resented her beauty, her grace, and the way Bako had loved her above all others. To Adisa, Zubadi's fall from grace was a small victory, but it was not enough. She's hiding something. Adisa whispered to the women around her, her voice like poison. She killed my brother and now digs to hide the evidence. Her words spread quickly, igniting the crowd's anger like dry grass to flame. Adisa's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as the villagers turned their fury toward Zubadi. Zubadi's nights were no longer her own. Her dreams were filled with shadows, figures that whispered riddles, and pointed toward the cursed tree in Omwoko. She saw Bako in those dreams, his face pale and his eyes pleading. Dig, Zubadi, he said. The truth is in the earth. She would wake with a start, her body drenched in sweat, and her heart heavy with a dread she could not name. The dreams pulled her toward the grave, each night deepening her resolve. She did not understand why, but she knew the answers lay beneath. The cursed soil. The grave became more than a hole in the ground. It was a symbol, a portal to the past, to the secrets buried beneath the forest shadows. And with every shovelful of dirt, Zubadi felt herself digging, not just into the earth, but into the weight of betrayal and destiny. The village grew restless. Rumors swirled like smoke, filling every corner with suspicion. She's cursed us all, someone said. Why do the elders let her stay? Baba Omari gathered the elders once more. The villagers grow impatient, he said. If we do not act, they will take matters into their own hands. Adisa seized the moment. She must be tried, she said. For the sake of the village. The elders hesitated, but the pressure of the crowd was undeniable. The trial was set for the next full moon, and the villagers whispered of justice and vengeance. As the trial approached, Zubadi returned to the grave each night. Her movements frantic but resolute. The villagers watched from a distance, their fear turning to anger. They could not understand her actions, and that ignorance fanned the flames of their suspicion. Zubadi, though weary, was unshaken. The dreams pressed her forward, their whispers growing louder with each passing night. She knew the truth lay beneath the soil, and she would uncover it, no matter the cost. The villagers gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree as night fell. The tree's twisted branches stretched skyward, like grasping hands. Its massive trunk, a silent witness to the many trials and stories it had seen through the years. Torches flickered in the cool breeze, casting long shifting shadows across the crowd. Faces filled with suspicion, anger, and unease glowed faintly in the light. Baba Omari, the chief elder, stepped forward, his staff tapping against the earth as he took his place before the assembly. His presence alone silenced the crowd, his expression one of deep gravity. "Tonight," he began, his voice resonating like the distant roll of thunder, "we gathered to seek the truth. Zubadi, widow of Bako, stands accused of witchcraft and of bringing ruin to this village. Let the spirits guide us, and let justice prevail." From the crowd emerged Adisa, her movements deliberate and her gaze sharp. She wore a brightly patterned shawl, its edges fluttering as if stirred by her rising emotions. Her voice, sharp and clear, rang out across the gathering. "Elders, brothers, sisters," she began, spreading her arms wide. "We all know the sorrow Bako's death brought to this village, but what sorrow could compare to that of a betrayed brother? My brother was lured to his death, his life stolen, by a woman who pretends to be innocent. While digging graves in the shadows of the night, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Adisa's words struck a nerve. She turned to Zubadi, her expression hard. What does she bury in the earth? What curse does she bring to us all? I say we cannot wait for her sorcery to bring more death." Zubedi stood motionless in the center of the gathering, her face serene despite the murmurs and stares around her. Her silence spoke volumes, though no one could hear its meaning. Her hands rested at her sides, calloused from work and streaked with faint traces of dirt. She looked not at the crowd, but at Baba Omari, whose piercing gaze sought answers. "Zubadi," Baba Omari said after a long pause. His voice was both commanding and searching. "The people demand an explanation. You dig in the forest under the full moon. You disturb the spirits. What say you to these accusations?" For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of torches and the rustling of leaves overhead. Then Zubadi lifted her chin, her voice calm but resolute. "If you seek answers," she said, her tone carrying over the crowd, "then follow me to the grave I have dug." Her words sent a chill through the villagers, silencing even the whispers. The procession into the forest was marked by tension, so thick it seemed to press on the very air. The villagers moved in a line, their torches cutting through the dense darkness of Omwoko. The path wound deeper and deeper, and with every step, the forest seemed to grow more alive, the shadows shifting and whispering like restless spirits. Adisa walked near the middle of the group, her confidence faltering as they approached the clearing. The cursed tree of Omwoko stood at its heart, its gnarled roots jutting from the ground like grasping fingers. The villagers hesitated, their torches flickering against the tree's ominous presence. Zubadi stepped forward, her movements steady. Without a word, she knelt at the edge of the grave she had dug. Her hands, bare and trembling, plunged into the loose soil, and she began to dig. The crowd watched in tense silence, the air thick with fear and anticipation. Dirt flew over Zubadi's shoulder as she worked, her breathing heavy but determined. At last, her hand struck something solid. She paused, then pulled at the object until it emerged. A skeleton, its bones wrapped in a familiar hunting cloth. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Women clutched their shawls, men stepped back in disbelief, and children hid behind their parents. "Barco's cloth," someone whispered. "It's him!" Zubadi rose to her feet, her hands caked with dirt. Her eyes scanned the crowd, her voice steady, but heavy with emotion. "For years," she began, "I have been haunted by dreams. Barco's voice called to me, leading me here, to this tree. He whispered of betrayal, of injustice buried beneath the earth. And now, here lies the truth." She turned to Adisa, whose face had gone pale. "You lured him here," Zubadi said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You and his rival plotted against him. You sent him into this forest, knowing he would never return." Adisa's eyes darted to the villagers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Lies!" she cried. "This woman speaks only lies. She killed him herself and now seeks to blame me." But her denial lacked conviction, and the murmurs of the crowd turned darker. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions grim. As Zubadi finished her tale, a deep rumble filled the air, as if the forest itself had heard her words. The villagers began to chant softly, their voices rising in unison to call upon the spirits. The air grew heavy, the sky darkening as clouds gathered overhead. A sudden wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing some of the torches. Lightning split the sky, striking the cursed tree of Omwoko. Flames erupted along its gnarled branches, illuminating the clearing in an eerie orange glow. Adisa fell to the ground, clutching her head and screaming. "No, no!" she cried, her voice a mix of terror and pain. "Forgive me, I confess. I confess," she sobbed, her words spilling out in a rush. "I hated her. I envied her. It was my fault. I led him to his death." The villagers watched, frozen in a mix of awe and fear, as Adisa's screams subsided into broken sobs. The flames around the tree dimmed, and shadows danced across the clearing. They coalesced around the grave, their movements slow and deliberate. Baba Omari's voice, deep and otherworldly, echoed through the space. "The spirits have spoken. Zubadi is innocent. Justice is demanded for Barco, whose life was stolen by jealousy and deceit." The villagers, humbled and awestruck, fell to their knees. Their whispers carried words of regret and respect, their earlier suspicions now replaced with reverence for the spirits and sorrow for their own blindness. Adisa was banished from the village, her pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. The elders decreed her punishment in the name of justice and peace. The cursed tree, now reduced to smouldering ashes, marked the end of an era of secrets and sorrow. The villagers turned to Zubadi, their heads bowed. "We were wrong," one elder said. "You are stronger than we ever knew. Forgive us, if you can." Zubadi said nothing at first, her gaze resting on the smouldering remains of the tree. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I forgive, not because you deserve it, but because I will not carry the burden of hate. Let the truth guide us now." The villagers pledged to honor Barco's memory and Zubadi's resilience, vowing never to let fear cloud their judgment again. The Clearing was quiet now, the villagers still kneeling on the damp earth. The last embers of the cursed tree smouldered in the background, casting a faint orange glow that seemed to dance in rhythm with the soft rustling of the forest. Zubadi stood tall among them, her frame illuminated by the light of a rising moon. Baba. Omari stepped forward, his staff tapping the ground with purpose. "The spirits have spoken," he said, his voice solemn. "Zubedi is free of guilt, and we, as a village, have wronged her." A murmur of shame rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children closer. Men lowered their gazes, and the weight of their collective misjudgment hung heavy in the air. Zubadi's face remained calm, her eyes betraying the pain she had carried for so many years. Though vindicated, the scars of isolation and mistrust could not so easily fade. Baba Omari turned to her. "Zubadi," he said, "your dignity has been restored. You have shown strength that few could muster. You are owed our deepest apologies." Zubadi bowed her head, her hands folded in front of her. She did not smile, but there was a quiet peace in her expression. Adisa stood apart from the group, her shoulders hunched as if weighed down by the full force of her guilt. Her once sharp eyes were now clouded with tears. She looked at Zubedi and opened her mouth to speak, but found no words. Zubadi's gaze rested on her sister-in-law, the woman who had betrayed her so deeply. For a moment, the clearing held its breath, waiting for her response. Then she stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Adisa," she began, "you have caused me great pain. You took Bako from me, and you turned this village against me. But I will not carry hatred in my heart." Her words cut through the air like a blade, leaving the villagers stunned. "Carrying hate would make me no better than those who cursed me," she continued. "I forgive you, not because it is easy, but because it is the only way to heal." Adisa fell to her knees, her sobs breaking through the silence. "Zubadi," she choked, "I am sorry. I was blinded by jealousy. I do not deserve your forgiveness." "No," Zubadi said softly, "you do not, but it is given." The villagers murmured among themselves, their faces reflecting a mix of awe and admiration. Even those who had scorned Zubadi now looked upon her with respect. Forgiveness, they realized, was the greatest strength of all. Baba Omari raised his staff high, signaling the beginning of the cleansing ritual. The villagers formed a circle around the ashes of the cursed tree, their torches flickering in the cool night air. Drums began to beat, slow and steady, their rhythm matching the thrum of the earth beneath their feet. "Tonight, we honor Bako," Baba Omari intoned. "We seek the ancestors' blessing for the soul that was wronged, and for the one who brought the truth to light." The villagers raised their voices in songs, a hymn of mourning and renewal. Zubadi stood at the center of the circle, her head bowed. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her like a river. As the drums quickened, the elders stepped forward with bowls of water and herbs, sprinkling the ashes of the cursed tree and murmuring prayers. The air seemed to lighten the oppressive weight of the past, lifting with each chant. When the ritual was complete, Baba Omari turned to the villagers. "Let this night be remembered," he said. "We have been cleansed, but we must also learn. Fear and jealousy clouded our judgment. Let us never again let them blind us to the truth." After the ritual, Baba Omari approached Zubedi, his weathered face soft with wisdom. "You have endured much," he said, "and through your pain, you have taught us a great lesson." He raised his voice so all could hear. "Truth, though buried, will always rise. Betrayal is a seed that bears bitter fruit, but forgiveness brings healing." The villagers nodded, the words sinking into their hearts. This day they knew would not be forgotten. It would become a story passed down through generations, a lesson in justice, honesty, and the strength of the human spirit. At dawn, Zubadi stood at the edge of the clearing where the cursed tree had once loomed. In her hands, she held a young baobab sapling, its roots wrapped in damp cloth. She knelt and placed it gently in the soil, pressing the earth around it with care. The villagers gathered behind her, watching in silence as she worked. The sapling was small, but its presence was powerful, a symbol of renewal, of truth uncovered and wounds mended. When she was finished, Zubadi stood and turned to face the crowd. "This tree will grow tall," she said, her voice carrying across the clearing. "It will remind us of Bako, of what was lost, and of what was found." The villagers bowed their heads in reverence. The sapling stood as a testament, not just to Bako's memory, but to the resilience of a woman who had risen above hatred and injustice. As the villagers began to disperse, Zubadi lingered by the grave where Bako's skeleton had been uncovered. She knelt beside it, her fingers brushing the soft earth. "Rest now, Bako," she whispered. "Your truth has set us free." The forest was quiet around her, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Zubadi sat there for a while, her heart heavy but no longer burdened. When she finally rose, the first rays of sunlight were breaking over the horizon. Her silhouette stood tall against the light, a figure of strength and hope. Without looking back, she walked away from the grave, her path illuminated by the golden glow of a new day. In her heart, she carried the knowledge that this was not an ending, but a beginning.